Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Run Inspired Series, our exclusive webinar aimed to helping ADNOC employees reach their full potential ahead of ADNOC Abu Dhabi Marathon on December 14th. I am Talib Salami, ADNOC employee and team captain of Abu Dhabi running team, and I'm delighted to have leading running coach Tala Elajou with us today, today's first webinar. Today's session will be a 25-minute long and cover everything from getting started in running, running basics, injury prevention, strength work, nutrition, mental preparedness, and tapering and race day tips. We will then finish with a 10 to 15-minute Q&A at the end to address questions that you may have. And before we start, I'll hand over to Tala to give us a quick introduction. Coach Tala, please go ahead.
Hi everyone, as Talib had said, my name is Tala Elajou. I'm a running coach based in the UAE. Very much focused on the marathon distance itself. Just find it to be such a special distance and taking people on their journey. I've been a coach for about going on about 10 years plus now. Incredibly passionate about getting people to that start line, watching their journey throughout. And I've been a runner pretty much my whole life. I started cross country when I was 13 and it hasn't really left me since. I'm still running and love taking people on this journey.
That's amazing. So I guess out of curiosity to clarify to people, what is a marathon distance? Why marathon, and what makes people so drawn to it?
So the marathon distance itself is 42.2 kilometers, and we kind of have to put in that 0.2 as well. And the reason there's something about the marathon that's so special is one, the sense of community that you can just get from doing the whole block, the training block itself. There's nothing like, marathon morning with people lining up the roads and watching a lot of people suffer, but also a lot of people smile. And I just find that the marathon itself is a bit of a journey like in life. It's a journey of self-discovery. You finding a strength that you didn't know you had. And I find that only with that marathon distance do you really tap into that unlocked potential. I don't think you really find it necessarily in a 5K, and you don't really get that sense of community either, where everyone is pushing through and pushing the boundaries of what they thought was possible. It's a pretty special distance.
Definitely, yeah, well, definitely is. For myself, running a number of marathons, you said it very eloquently when you said it's a journey of self-discovery. Literally running for 42 kilometers, 42.2 kilometers for whether it's 2 hours or 4 hours or 5 or 6 hours. You go through that phase where you would know more about yourself than in any other activity. Sometimes
you learn a lot about yourself, the highs and the lows, how to get yourself out of the lows and how to ride the high, and learning to hold back a bit and learning patience. And it's literally a journey of self-discovery for 42.2 kilometers.
all right. So what are the basic running essentials then?
So essentially, obviously, to start running, good pair of shoes. That is key. A good pair of socks as well. Um, Shorts or leggings, depending. A good running vest, a dry fit vest. Not one of those sort of cotton tops. And then you have the other little extras that people might need, which is maybe a phone to use a running app, where they might, not everyone starts with a GPS running watch. There's a lot of apps as well that help you start running from a couch to 5K. And then also having your phone for music. So then that entails also headphones. And then the other basics is sunglasses and a hat. And to start with, that is kind of all you need, is shoes, socks, obviously the clothing, and then your phone, just whether it's for the music or the app as well. The running watch can wait, especially if you're a beginner. It can be an extra daunting thing, but we live in a world with great technology now that even, the Apple watches and the smart watches do have GPS tracking as well to help you on your running journey.
All right. Well, one of the things that you've mentioned as part of the basic running essentials is having the right pair of shoes. So how important is that? Why is having the right pair of shoes among the essential things that you must have to start running, I would say, so to speak, on the right foot?
So, I mean, we're all made differently. Obviously, everyone has feet that are made differently, whether it's your arch foot or flat footed, whether you run on your forefoot or you're a heel striker. But fundamentally, finding a basic pair of running shoes, putting one foot in front of the other helps from, blisters. You can't go running in a pair of heels, let's say, or flip-flops, because you're just going to end up injured. So it is the basic of everything. They are there for your stability, to help protect your joints, to help you toe off properly. They just, they're there to help you put one foot in front of the other, and keep you injury free and be able to run comfortably, whether it's for 200 meters or a kilometer or a whole marathon. And the more you get used to running in your running shoes, the more comfortable that whole journey will feel. Because fundamentally, running to start with is not easy. So let's make it a bit easier and put on a pair of running shoes rather than, a pair of flip-flops or barefoot.
Well, as you said, running is not easy, but should it be a painful journey?
It can be at times, obviously, especially if you haven't trained properly or you're not wearing the right pair of shoes. If you buy a pair of shoes that are too tight, that's going to be blisters, and that journey will be hard. So there's a lot of fantastic shops within our region. You can go in, try in what fits, what works, what feels comfortable for you personally, and then get your journey started. And look, at times you might get it wrong. At times you might buy a pair of shoes and in the shop they feel great, and once you start running, they actually don't feel that great. And unfortunately, it is a bit of trial and error. You'll go through quite a few pairs to start with, but with a lot of research, there's a lot of information out there about brands and shoes, your easy running shoe, your racing shoe, your tempo shoe. So just do a bit of research before, kind of see what your foot looks like, what you want your shoe, what you want to get out of the shoe as well. Especially as a new runner, I wouldn't go for that high performance racing shoe. Start with your daily running shoe that has good cushioning, good stability, and feels comfortable.
So what you're saying basically is it doesn't necessarily mean the more expensive the shoes, the better.
Not at all. I think people tend to think that and go, well, I'll spend, 1,000+ dirhams and get the most high performance running shoe, and that will help me run. But there is a shoe for every type of running that you do. So I would start with, especially if you're not sure where your running journey is going to take you, start with a basic running shoe that's very reasonably priced, that has all the good reviews and recommendations of a good, stable daily running shoe. Once you've kind of put a bit of time and distance on it, and you then go, okay, let me sign up for my first race, then maybe spend, a bit more money on a racing shoe or a more high performance shoe. But don't do that to start with.
So good cushioning or carbon plates?
Good cushioning to start, hands down. I always say that carbon shoes are amazing and they've changed the game of running. But if you are it's like driving a Ferrari in first gear. You're not going to get a lot out of it, unfortunately. The carbon shoes are there to, once you put a bit of speed, they'll go with you. But if you're just going out for let's say an easy run, it's not going to go with you. They're just going to feel like platform shoes. So that's why every shoe is done for a specific type of run. So go with the stability. Make sure that also that will help you stay injury free, is picking that right running shoe as well.
Now, thank you, Coach, for this information. Now, would a lot of the runners, including myself, would ask ourselves the question, shall we eat before a long run? Or shall we have any type of mid-activity snack or how should we should we just go crazy and treat ourselves with a nice breakfast after the long run? Should it be always, is there anything you would like, from your experience as coach, how should runners eat before, during, or after a run?
So general rule of thumb is don't necessarily run fasted. Anything that is 45 minutes or so, you can get away with it. But once you get into anything that's over 60 minutes, that's when those energy stores start to deplete. So you really should be fueling your body a bit like an engine you're putting petrol in a car. For you to carry on going, you need to fuel your body. So we do live obviously in a country where we do have to get up quite early in the morning to avoid the hot weather. So if you are getting up, let's say at 5:30 a.m. for your run, have a nice sort of heavier dinner, which will allow you to then get up, and be able to start your run without necessarily having a big breakfast, because you're not going to have breakfast at 4 a.m. The key thing as well is also throughout the run, looking at the timing of your run and how long you think you're going to go out for. Be prepared to have your fueling, and your fueling can be in the form of a gel. It could be in the form of sweets. It could be in the form of also carbohydrate drinks that are pretty good as well. Anything that works for you within that 60 plus minutes, start to take in fueling. The rule of thumb is anywhere between 30 to 60 grams of carbs per hour. But again, that is a range depending on a lot of things, how quickly you burn that fuel, how much you need it and how often. And that will come through trial and error. There is not a specific, this is what you need to do for everyone, unfortunately. And you will only be able to find that out by constantly testing every single long run that you do. Use it as a practice run. So practice your dinner the night before, practice the morning of, maybe have a piece of toast with peanut butter, or if you can have oatmeal, allow that to digest, and then you have your run. You might start to go, oh, my stomach doesn't like that. Okay, that doesn't work, let's try something else. Every 45 minutes you might start to need a gel. Some people it's every hour. And then again, there's a lot of different types of carbohydrate, forms of carbohydrates to try. Try one. Try while you are in your training block. Do not try it on race day. And you go, okay, my stomach actually, that feels good. It's staying in. Great. You keep that, use that brand and stick to it. Don't try and, then try and stuff. Whatever you do that works, stick to it.
So would having these nutrition help in injury prevention in any way?
What they don't necessarily help in injury prevention. What they do help is delay the onset of fatigue. So what happens is when you're running, your glycogen stores start to deplete. So there's sort of that sugar and those energy levels. So what will lead to injury will be the fatigue, not necessarily the sort of the nutrition. If so, you need to make sure you stay on top of it. You're giving your body that fuel, which is that energy source of sugar, to carry on, to make sure that you don't end up cramping, you don't end up fatigued or hitting what we call hitting that wall, which comes from complete depletion of your glycogen stores.
What about hydration?
So key.
What is the best way to stay hydrated?
So especially in this region, we sweat a lot. There's no sugarcoating it. You need to hydrate, and not just the day of the run itself, the 2 days leading to your long run as well, especially making sure you're taking in your water, your electrolytes, and then on the morning of as well, making sure that you take some water before you run, and you maybe map out a route where you could stop to get water, or you plan on keeping water somewhere that you could get back to, or petrol station that you could get to, but making sure that throughout your run, you're constantly, I always say little and often, than too much in one go, and then you feel completely done. So making sure that you plan. Again, the exact numbers depend. I'm not going to give an exact number because it depends on people's sweat rates, how much they sweat, how much water they can take on, how much electrolytes they can take on. So it can get a little bit scientific, but as long as you make sure that you stay on top of drinking often, especially in sort of little blocks, and you stay on top of it, the better you'll feel.
Okay. So again, we get often asked, as you said, the question, should I have 2 liters, 3 liters the day before, or maybe probably the week before the marathon? And I have tried what you're saying, that I fell into the trap where I only hydrated the night before.
Yes.
And I ended up, basically paying the price later on during the marathon, which, yes, there are plenty of hydration stops, but it gets to you. So mental toughness or mental strength, is it something that we can train for? I'm not sure it's just only for marathon, but practically for any distance. How do we get to that point? How is that a key to finishing a marathon?
The mental, I mean, let's all be, anytime, not even just the marathon itself, even on a lot of training runs, it's always that mental resilience of you're never going to you don't jump out of bed every single day going, I want to go for a run. So that's also the start of your mental resilience of going, you know what, I'm going to go because I've never regretted when I finished not gone for a run. So number one, that consistency in just getting out the door every day or every other day or however many times you run, that's already the prep of, some mental resilience in the run itself. The marathon itself is, as much as it is physical, it's as much mental. You will go through a lot of ups and downs mentally, more so than physically, because what I always say to my runners is stay in the moment. Don't think of the entire race, because thinking about the entire race, you can go into a bit of a mental breakdown and get really anxious. That anxiety isn't going to help your mental state of mind either. So it's practicing your race strategy, practicing just learning to relax, practicing how to get yourself out of the hard moments. So with that mental toughness is maybe thinking of a mantra, what will get you through that hard kilometer or maybe 5 kilometers, whether it's counting down or counting to 100, whether it's singing your favorite song, or actually even just remembering why you run in the first place. All these little tools will really help you get past the bad patches and really help you kind of remember why you're doing it in the first place. And mentally, that will really help you finish, because fundamentally, the last 4 or 5Ks of a marathon are all mental, because it is the end, you're tired, and you just need to remember why you're doing it in the first place.
Coach, you've ran multiple marathons, and I'm sure what you're saying here comes from experience. You've read about them and you've been through them. What keeps you motivated? What keeps you motivated to run, especially on tough days? One of the questions here that we've gotten that in here, you started your discussion with this, that it's there's no denying it. It's humid and warm weather here. Sometimes going for a long run outdoors will be extremely challenging. We might have to increase the weekly mileage, but then we hit reality. We cannot achieve the 24K, for example, for this week or the next week, and we end up doing, let's say, 15K. How do we process that? How do we know that is okay if we cannot finish this distance, or what are the alternative that you would suggest from your experience to stay motivated?
So again, the biggest thing when you start a marathon journey, from whether it's a 12-week block, 14, 18, whichever it is, start with writing your why. Why are you doing this in the first place? Because actually that is the key thing that's going to get you through the really hard moments. Okay, So I find that when I get out the door and I go for a run, and it might not be my day, because realistically, not every run is going to feel good. Unfortunately, I think people always have this expectation of the more I run, the better I'll feel on my runs. But unfortunately, running is so up and down. It's not a linear journey where you're just constantly going to feel great. And it's understanding that even on the bad days, it's okay. It's a bad day. We shake it off. We move on, and let's focus on the next day or the next long run. So in saying that, if you have a long run and it's not gone great, it's okay, because I find the bad runs are actually where you learn the most. You learn the most on what went right, what went wrong, and thinking back and going, because the good runs, you tend to like feel great and you forget about them. But the biggest lessons learned are on those bad days. Uh, and if it was really hard, I didn't manage it well, I started too late, right? Let's avoid those mistakes for next week. Let's look at the positive and let's make sure we prepare. But fundamentally, we're not robots, right? We're not robots where even if you do everything right, you might still have a bad run. And it's just having the confidence in yourself, finding that community that will also pull you through those bad days as well, which are super important. The running buddies that you go with that will help keep you motivated, and going back to that initial, finding your why to help make sure that you stay on track. For me, for example, my kids are my biggest why, in terms of why I always run. If I go out the door, I want to make sure that it matters. I'm spending time away from them. So if I'm going to go, I might as well make it, whether it's good or bad, but at least I've never come back regretting a run, whether it's gone great or badly as well.
Would you prefer running solo or with a group, and why?
With a group, always.
100%,
There is something,
100%.
I'll tell you why 100%. There is something about the connections with people when you spend 30K running side by side. You get to know people really well, and people get to know you really well, and they see you through almost your worst, sweating and everything. And people will still love you, but also, those people will also help. If you're having a bad day, that person or community will lift you up, and then vice versa. There's nothing like running with people to keep your motivation up. Don't get me wrong. At times, I love running on my own for an easy run day. But when it comes to a track session, a tempo session, or a long run, I need people around me. I need people around me, even if they're 100 meters ahead, just to kind of just make sure that, there's always someone there. Whether you start with people and you finish, it's the showing up that matters. And so for me, that community aspect when it comes to a half or a marathon is second to none. I see that a lot of the communities in Dubai and in Abu Dhabi, you see the joy of people running together. We're social animals, we're social beings. We're not meant to be on our own. So you get to know people so well running together, and there's no better feeling. There's been friendships that have been bonded over 26 kilometers, 42, and it's unbelievable.
I could definitely relate to that. From personal experience, people always have this competitive aspect of running, and they always talk about the biggest team, the biggest group, and I redefine it as we are the biggest family. My running buddies, at one point, as you said, you go through a lot of self-reflection. Running a long run of 30 kilometers or 28 kilometers on a weekend, it's not an easy thing. Showing up there at 5 a.m. in the morning, running that distance. Yes, I put on my music, but then you get to a point where you just need to talk. You need to keep it conversational. It gets you through it. And you end up learning a lot about your running buddies. And sometimes, believe it or not, they don't even remember sharing that kind of information. We share things and then we're like, wait, did I just share too much? But then you say, no, it's okay. They're family. Well, we covered the mental strength aspect, and for me, from my humble experience in running as well, I would definitely add to that this I would like you to talk about the wall. Everybody is talking about the
Yeah.
wall, and that whole mental strength, mental toughness. The track session could be boring. When you repeat 400s 12 times, you do 200s 15 or 16 times. People say, why do we do it on the track? We just keep going on loops. It's boring. Is it necessary? So what is this wall people are talking about? And does everyone go through it, or is it just, it's situational where people, certain runners go through it because of?
So it's definitely not every runner will go through it. If you come to that start line prepared, you won't go through it. Again, it's that's where the training plan is key, and making sure that you stick to that training plan. The more consistent you are with your running, and consistent you are with your long runs, and consistent with your practicing your fueling and your hydration, and you come to that start line making sure that you're running the goal that you've been training for. The wall will come for people that try to run too fast on race day. Number one, people for some reason think that on race day they can suddenly run 20 seconds quicker than what they've planned. Your body hasn't trained for that. 2/3 of that marathon should be aerobic, where you actually feel like you're holding back, right? That wall will come if you've run too quickly, not trained for it, underfueled, not practiced your fueling, and suddenly you've gone from, I've run my half marathon PB in the race, to a 32K almost having to walk, because your glycogen stores have gone, your body hasn't trained at that pace, and you literally cannot go any quicker. You're done for. Now there's different variations of that wall where it is literally having to run walk. And then it can just be like a little dip, right? It's not necessarily at 36K or at 34, but generally once you get into that 30 mark, it could happen. I just say that don't think of that wall. Be in the moment, be present in your 1 kilometer at a time. Because if you think of the wall, again, you're going to get that anxiety and think, oh my God, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. It might not ever come. If you're incredibly present in your moment and in your kilometer per kilometer, and you're feeling good and you're staying within the pace that you've practiced, you should have a wonderful race. It's when you try and be a hero, don't take your gels and try and run quicker, or actually maybe having come into it slightly injured as well, that will come. But essentially the wall is just your energy stores have just gone. There's gone, and then there's no necessarily coming back from it. Adrenaline will help you get through that sort of last few kilometers, but generally it's just being from underfueled and going way too quick on your marathon day.
All right. So tapering. What is tapering? Why do we need to taper? Can't we just keep that momentum that we've built all the way to marathon day, all the way to the night before? Why can't we just keep it steady all the way from start to finish?
The reason I'm smiling is because it's the taper is actually the hardest part as a coach to manage,
Is it hard?
because it's not even physical, it's more psychological for a lot of people. It's called taper anxiety as well, because it's when runners feel most unsure. Because when you're in your training block and you're doing your long runs, you're feeling a little bit more confident. You're like, I've got into my 30K, or I've got into my 32. And now you're telling me I'm having to take 2 or 3 weeks of deloading to be ready, but it doesn't make sense, right? For a lot of people, that whole concept doesn't make sense. Essentially, a taper is a deload. So you're trying to deload. So with running, you're trying to build, and peak. And then you bring that down so we can have fresh legs for race day. Because if you were just to keep carrying on, you would get to the race incredibly fatigued. So you do need that deload a little bit, and you just do some sharpening sessions to then allow you to get to that start line as fresh and as ready as possible and not fatigued. And within that, it goes back to that taper anxiety, where people start going, have I done enough? Should I be doing more? Why am I only doing 14 the week before the marathon? How am I going to run 42? but you have to trust the process. Whether you've been doing it with a coach or with a community or a plan online, you just have to trust the process, because if you don't trust it and you keep carrying on, you might hit that wall that we were talking about. Taper is so crucial as a part of your marathon training block, and making sure that you don't do too much. It's listening to the body, taking a lot of that intensity and that volume away, and just making sure that you're getting as much rest. Now, don't get me wrong, you still have to run in a taper. It doesn't mean that you stop running, but we're just taking that intensity and that volume down slightly to give your legs the rest that they need to be able to run the marathon, whether it's a PB or your first, but with the freshest legs possible.
And I've had my shares in the trials and error. The best marathons that I've done are those who I tapered correctly.
Yeah.
We go through a lot in our day, whether it's work or family or life in general. We might slack off in some of the training sessions. But when I tapered, when I lowered the intensity, when I had a well-rested week or two before the marathon, I woke up that morning fresh, ready to take it on, happy, never did not walk a single kilometer. I had to, I mean, of course, walking through in a marathon is not a bad thing.
No, not at all.
It happens. I've seen people trying the strategy of the run walk strategy, if it works for them, as long as you finish the distance. But always in our mind that we need to run it from start to finish. And once you fall short, you start calculating things. You start asking yourself, where did it go wrong? I'm not feeling well. I'm not rested. With that in mind, yeah, go ahead.
And I just find as well, a lot of people tend to get quite ill, like quite sick in the taper, whether they get a cold or a flu, because it's suddenly this deload and suddenly the body's resting and you're more open to getting sick. So you just need to make sure definitely in that taper, you're listening to the body, sleeping when needed, maybe even skipping out on a session, because that 2 weeks is actually the key to you running a really good race. As you said, it's as long as you make sure that you are resting when needed, running when needed, keeping those legs nice and fresh, not doing anything new, don't start playing paddle during your taper, for example. You'll get to that start line feeling pretty good.
All right. So what are the tips for race day then? What is the top of the list to be prepared for race day? So race day is here. We're just about to go to sleep the night before, all anxious, butterflies in our stomach. We don't know if we're ready for this, even though we trained for months. I can look at my gear; they're all ready right in front of me. My bib is there, my shirt, my shorts. I take them that beautiful picture for social media. I'm gonna do a marathon. This is gonna be my first marathon. But deep inside, I'm not sure how am I gonna feel when I reach that start line. So what are your tips for race day?
Have fun. Honestly, and I can't keep saying this enough, we've all chosen to run, and what a gift it is to be able to run, which a lot of people cannot. So for me, I find that the people that put the most pressure on themselves end up having the worst races, compared to people that just go in with such an open heart and an open mind and just going, I'm going to have fun regardless, even when it's hard. Now, it doesn't mean you can still have fun and race hard.
Correct.
The training is the hard part, the racing is the fun part. All the hard work is done. Trust yourself and enjoy the moment, because if it's your first marathon, you're never going to have that moment again. And so you need to make sure you get to that start line remembering your journey that you got here, and just having fun, because if you don't, you won't enjoy it, and you might not ever do one ever again. So for me, that is probably one of the biggest sort of messages that I say to all my runners. Just go out there and have the best time possible. Give it your best, because your best is your own best. Don't run anyone else's race. Run your own race, and fundamentally enjoy yourself, because if you don't enjoy yourself, then why did you do this in the first place? And I'd say probably the second thing is also, do not try anything new. So key. Do not try a new pair of shoes on race day. Do not try any new gels. Don't try a new breakfast. Don't try a new top, whatever it is. Everything that, as you were saying, that you've laid out on race day, your shoes, your bib, your top, everything that you have should be everything that you have tested in your run itself, along with your morning breakfast. So if you're traveling for the race and they might not have what you've had, make sure that you pack it with you. If you are traveling as well, just make sure that you have your gels with you. Don't put them in your suitcase because that suitcase might get lost. So in hand luggage, for example, have your shoes, have your gels. Those are the two key things you should have in your hand luggage whenever you go to a race that might be abroad. And don't try anything new. Those are the two most important things I'd say. Have fun, don't try anything new. And again, same thing with the don't try anything new. Don't try a new pace that you haven't tested. Don't try be a hero on race day and think, well, I'll just run faster and it will be fine. You cannot bank time in a marathon. You can't go, I'll run really quick and I'll make up that time when I go slower. The marathon is, I call a fickle beast. It humbles you a lot and you have to respect it.
Marathon is a respectable distance.
Yes.
It's not to be taken lightly. Thank you, Tala, and I'm gonna open the floor for some of the Q&As if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
Particularly this one that caught my attention regarding the shoes. So how would we know what is the right time to change the shoe?
So when it comes to a training block, and I'm just going to use the block itself rather than just running, in general, because there's different shoes for different purposes. Um, Depending on the shoe, your easy stability sort of run shoe that you'll use for your daily runs and let's say your long runs, you can put quite a lot of distance and mileage on them. Some of them can go to about 500, 700 kilometers. And you'll just see a bit of that wear and tear underneath, right? You'll see that cushioning. Now, high performance shoes have a lot less of that longevity because they are high performance and the carbon. So within a carbon or a racing shoe, I would probably only put about 30 or 40 Ks in it before you wear it for the race day itself. Once you wear it for the race itself, pack it away, don't use it again. Use it for the next race. But you don't use your racing shoe as your weekly running shoe, because it won't have the stability that you need. You'll end up getting calf injuries, Achilles issues, and all sorts of different niggles. So generally, I'd say with a stable running shoe, it can go up to 500 to about 600-700. You'll see underneath the wear. And with a stability, with a performance shoe, it can go 100, 200, maybe 300 max, if that. So that's why wear them only for races.
Thank you. And is it important to stretch or warm up before a run, or can you just wing it?
Depending on your age.
I thought age is just a number.
I mean, it is, but the younger you are, obviously, the more sort of mobile you are. As we get older, a lot of us spend time sitting down in an office or in a car.
Correct.
So I would highly suggest that before a run, you do a lot of dynamic movement. So things like leg swings are great just to warm up the hips as well, because obviously you're gone from sitting, to standing. So doing a dynamic warm up before a run is super important. Mobility and running are sort of brother and sister. I think the more mobile you are, the better you'll move, the better your hips will move, and the more your body will want to go with you. You look at some of the elite runners and how beautifully they move. That's great mobility. And then after a run, more static stretching. Super important. Get the foam roller and do some static stretching. If anything feels a little bit stiff, then definitely stretch. And I would highly recommend, especially in a training block, is getting a massage every couple of weeks.
Sports massage, right?
Yes, a nice sort of sports massage just to release, because running is high impact. I mean, you think about it, you're running with your entire body weight. So when you start to increase those distances, especially, you're going through almost muscle breakdown to help regenerate to get you stronger. So, you're going to feel a bit tight and a bit sore. And within that, that's kind of a lot of times when injuries can happen if you're not listening to your body. So don't wait till something happens to then make the decision to go get a massage or see a physio. The whole thing is maintenance. Maintenance is key. So in a peak block of training, every 10 days, get a sports massage. Just a nice release. Even if nothing's wrong, just stay on top of it before anything goes wrong.
Does breathing and pace, or heart rate, is it related? I mean, the way we breathe and the way our heart rate works, is it related? Does it affect the heart rate? Is there any technique for right, so to speak, right breathing, or you just breathe normally?
So there's no technique for right breathing because obviously, some people have very different lung capacity. People have a different VO2 max. People have a different resting heart rate. So this can be into a whole nother sort of 45-minute conversation. But I will say is the more you breathe through the belly, the more you'll have the ability to take bigger breaths. A lot of people tend to run very much just from the chest and kind of have their shoulders up, and that's a very constricted type of breathing. And because we spend so much time on a laptop and quite rounded, you're basically compressing that diaphragm a little bit. So I would say rather than thinking of how often should I breathe, think about running with a much more open chest, breathing through that belly, making sure your head is stacked, because there's been a lot of research that has shown if your head is too far forward, your head weighs about 5-6 kilos. Imagine having that forward. That's just, making you almost fall forward. So making sure you're nice and stacked. Run with an open heart is what I always tell people. Just have that nice open chest. It's just going to open up that diaphragm, open up that chest. Make sure you breathe through your belly and run relaxed. If you feel like you're running and you're out of breath, then run walk. Run walk is a great way to start your running journey without feeling necessarily disheartened because you're out of breath. So start with a 1-minute run, 1-minute walk maybe. If that feels too easy, then go 2 minutes run, 1-minute walk, and just build from that. And allow, because the heart's a muscle. So the more you work on it, it will get stronger and stronger. But if you overreach too soon, you're just going to feel out of breath.
Okay, so you mentioned hydration is important to stay hydrated before the run and after the run. Is that in any way also related to the side stitch that we might have?
So a side stitch is a sort of a contraction in your diaphragm. A lot of people think, oh, if I've eaten too much, I'm going to get a side stitch. The side stitch has all to do with breathing. And again, if you're able to belly breathe and get your diaphragm working properly, you'll avoid getting that side stitch. The dehydration, that will be a high heart rate. You'll definitely feel that a lot more. If you're dehydrated, you'll feel completely depleted of energy. But the side stitch has a lot to do with breathing and not dehydration itself.
Training in the morning or the evening, does it make a difference?
So subjective. Some people love to run in the morning and get it done,
Are you a
and other
morning
people in the
person?
evening. I love running in the morning, and I will say I'm a big advocate for, if you can do it in the morning, do it in the morning, because then it's done. Because as much as you might have all the best intentions in the world to do it in the evening, life happens, work happens, you might get called into a meeting, you might get stuck in traffic, and then you miss your run. When it's done in the morning, it's done. There's no distractions. You can get on with your day and know that it's done. So if your day carries on, it's fine.
Would running in the evening though affect your sleep cycle? I just had a discussion at one point with one of my coworkers after an interval or speed workout. They feel very energetic afterwards, and they have difficulties going to bed. From your experience, is that something that happens to all of us, some people, or can you shed some light on this?
100%. You run at night. I mean, running, you get those running endorphins, right? Endorphins are those happy hormones. So you do feel better, hence you feel energetic. And it's really hard to switch off, especially after a track session. I personally can only do my track session in the evening as well. So I tend to make sure that when I come back, I try and wind down, get some food in me, because also when you start eating and having dinner, that digestion will make you a bit sleepy. And then try and do maybe a little bit of yoga and stretching just to calm that nervous system down to then allow you to sleep. For example, magnesium is a great supplement to take, especially as a runner, about 30 minutes before you sleep, because it will help your recovery and kind of help that wind down and help that muscle recovery as well. So, some people can only run at night. Now, by no means is it a bad thing, but just know that it might affect your sleep a little bit, that you might go to bed a bit later than you would like, but then maybe that morning just sleep in a bit more, so you kind of do what works for you. And if you know that it's going to kind of make you quite energetic, just go, okay, I'm going to give myself 2 hours after my run before I go to sleep.
Now, here's a question. I know I'm going to probably shoot myself in the foot for this. Is it okay to run more than one marathon in a year?
So I would only really recommend 2, max 3 a year, maximum 3 a year. Ideally 2 is great. Anything above 3, you're then, I say, playing with fire, and that it's fine. But fundamentally, why are you running that marathon? Everyone has their thing of I'm running to go discover the city. So I'm going to run that marathon and, be able to run. I'm not going to push myself. But throughout the year, you can have what I call A, B, C, D races, right? So whichever one is the most important, make sure you take that one sort of seriously. And then everything else is either a training run or a social run or social marathon. But try not to have 3 or 4 A races in a year, because then you'll sort of lose your motivation if you're constantly training for something. I find that if you have the goal, you rest after the goal, you think of what your next one would be, that motivation stays. But if you do too much, you'll end up burning out and just not really enjoying it much anymore.
Now, here's a tricky question, and I'm gonna mix it with another one. So one of the questions is, does our BMI matter for the long runs? Do we have to have a certain, again, it's subjective, a certain weight to be able to run long distances, or it doesn't matter? If it doesn't matter, how should we equip ourselves to run such distance and still be okay with it without getting injured? And the second part of the question, again, I'm just going to mix them together. Wearing those weight vests, some of us are training with weight vests and they run with them regardless of the weight that they have. How effective would that be? Was it recommended? Does it add any value? From your experience, would you be able to, give us some tips on that, please?
So going back to the first part about running and BMI, running is for everyone. It is hands down a sport that is for everyone. Everyone can get on the road, everyone can get a pair of shoes on, regardless of your BMI, you can go and run. How you run, again, is very subjective, in that regardless of your BMI, find a strategy that works for you, that allows you to run well and feel good while running. So whether that is a run walk strategy of a 1 kilometer run with a 200-meter walk, and that makes you feel good and you feel you can run longer, then fantastic. You don't have to weigh 50 kilos to be a runner. It's the beauty of this sport, is that it's for everyone. Just find a strategy that works for you. And the more you do it and the more consistent you are, the easier running will feel. But I think people that then think that running will feel easier if they only run once a week, it won't. but when you start running, regardless of your BMI, making sure that you start with the basics and don't do too much too soon, because that's kind of when the injuries happen. I think people I want to start running and they start trying to run 5Ks. 5Ks is a really long way if you've never run before. So I would sort of say start small and every day build it up a little bit. Start with 10 minutes, start with a 30-second jog, 90-second walk. Do that for 10 minutes. God, felt great. That was easy. Right. Next day, do a little bit more. Maybe you run for a minute, walk for a minute. Do that for 15 minutes. People try and rush too much too soon. And I think that's why they might get disheartened and go, oh, running is so hard. And then going back now to the other question with the weighted vest, I'm a very old school running coach, and I believe in keeping things simple. There is the fundamentals that work, which is the tempo sessions, the track sessions, and the long runs. Putting on a weighted vest is much more high rocks, CrossFit, kind of trying to get a little bit more into that strength, but it's not going to help you run your marathon better. What will help you run your marathon better is running consistently, fueling well, hydrating well, sticking to your training plan, sticking to the paces that you want to try and achieve. But unfortunately, putting on a weighted vest, yes, as much as it will help you get stronger, is it going to help you run faster? Not necessarily, because that's a lot of upper body that that's going to load onto your hips and onto your lower back and onto your quads. You're better off separating the two. Running is running, strength work is strength work. I wouldn't bring the weight into running, because then you're going into that more strength and conditioning as opposed to just pure running or pure strength.
How can runners avoid common injuries? I mean, shin splints, you name it. There's a lot of, running injuries that we might have already gone through them. Hopefully, we don't wish upon anyone to get injured, but it might happen. So how can we avoid them? Is there a routine for us to follow?
So with that, shin splints and a lot of the most common running injuries quite often happen when people tend to load up their kilometers too quickly. So they'll go from 20 kilometers a week to suddenly jumping up to 50K a week. The body doesn't like that. The body is incredibly clever. And if you kind of drip feed it a bit week on week and add in, okay, I'll go 20K this week. Next week, my total weekly mileage will be 25, and I'll do that for a couple of weeks. The more you give it the routine and the consistency, the better it will adapt to that and keeping you injury free. And then the second part is keeping up with the strength work and making sure you're working on any issues that you may have. One of the biggest things with strength work as well, especially with running, is work on your single leg strength work, and as well on strength work that takes your knees in different directions. Running is very forward only, so the load on obviously your knees is quite a lot. So the more outside of running you're doing stuff to protect your body, the better. So whether that's doing some lateral lunges, going out to the side, or curtsy lunges or reverse lunges, working on single leg toe touches or single leg step ups to work on that, working on your glutes and your hips, all of that, and that especially your ankles, all your joints, the hips, the knee, the ankle, work on strengthening those, working on getting the mobility in that, and you'll find that you'll be able to stay injury free.
How can a non-runner who never ever ran before get into this habit of running?
Start slowly. Again, it goes back to that, the more you don't make it too daunting, too much too soon, the habit will come because they're enjoying it. So, if someone's never run before, I'm going to start with 10 minutes today. And you finish, you go, oh, that was great. I want to do more tomorrow. The people get demotivated because they try and do too much too soon and find that actually they can't keep up, or it's too much. So start slow. Start slow, build up a really nice base. Don't sign up to a marathon before you've just got that really good solid foundation. Find a running community as well, because there'll be other people on the same journey as you. And that's the great thing about running communities. You'll find people that have also just started running. And suddenly you're surrounded by people that will keep you motivated. And you'll know that, oh, when I get there on a Saturday morning, people will be there. I'm not on this journey on my own.
Now, here's another tricky question. You ready for this?
Yes.
All right. So, quite often we're asked, what is the furthest distance we should run or complete before running a marathon? Can we run a marathon before running a marathon? Is that part of the training plan? When you do a 5K, for example, and you're training for 5K race, you could easily do a five. I say easily subjectively here. You could
Yeah.
run a 5K before doing an actual 5K race. But is it the same with a marathon? Can you run a 42 kilometers before the marathon day, let's say 2 weeks or 3 weeks before that? Or what is the most common training plans, the furthest distance we could run safely, again, to prevent injuries and
Yeah.
whatnot, before a marathon?
So definitely do not run a marathon before a marathon. That's definitely the rule of thumb globally, is don't ever run a marathon before. Now, again, it looks back at, if this is your first marathon, I wouldn't necessarily go up to 38 Ks. The rule of thumb is run about 3/4 of the race as much as you can. So the range is anywhere from 30 to 36, but it's depending on how you yourself, if you actually ran 30, you're like, I'm actually still feeling okay, I could do one more week of increasing my long run, then go for it. But then if you've done your long run and you've done 32 and there's 3 weeks to go, stop there. Don't try and push through, because the thing is the more time we spend on our feet, the higher the risk of injury, which is why we don't run the full distance until race day itself. I mean, as you know, Talib, as well, when you finish a marathon, the next day your legs are gone, and they're gone for a few days. So you want to make sure that you're managing your load really well and listening to your body. If you're part of a running community, speak to that coach. If you have a coach, or even just doing a little bit of research online, a lot of people might not necessarily have a coach, but round about getting into that 30K plus mark, especially for your first one, is a good place to start. More seasoned runners will obviously go a lot longer. They'll maybe go to 36, maybe 38. Their taper might be a bit different, but generally, rule of thumb, 30 to 32, especially for your first marathon, just to make sure that we're kind of getting you there. And as we said, I know most people will think, but then how can I do 10K more if I've only done 32? The body will do unbelievable things on race day. And you know that on race day itself, you can push that much harder, because it's okay. You're resting after anyway. That's a marathon done. But if you do too much in your training plan and you get injured, that's your race done before you've even started.
Right, great. So I guess we pretty much wrapped up most of the questions. I would like to add one thing. I get asked this question a lot. First marathon, people freak out before the marathon. It is, you're running against the distance, not the time. So would you agree that for first timers at least, you shouldn't really have a PB set, a personal best for the first marathon? I want to do my first marathon in sub 3 hours. And it's a first marathon. The training process is one thing, running it on race day against the clock is completely another. Um, would like to take your feedback on this, and we will wrap up the session. Go ahead, please.
I'm exactly the same for all my first time marathon runners. I don't even put a time. And sometimes they say to me, but please, can we put a time for it? And I absolutely refuse, because you're only going to run your first marathon once. That first feeling of being on the start line and this unknown is a great feeling to have, because the pressure will come after that on your second, third, fourth marathon. The pressure will be there to get that time. But this unknown feeling, you're never going to have it again. So almost enjoy it. Enjoy that feeling of, I don't know what's coming. I've trained as hard as I can. I know I can run 3/4 of it. My mind, my heart, my legs will take me to the rest. But you're never going to have that first feeling of a marathon ever again. So enjoy it. Don't put a time on it, because once you do put that time, you've run that first marathon. Let's say you run it in 4 hours 15. Then the next one, go, oh, I would love to break sub 4. Cool, let's go for it. But do not put that pressure on yourself on your first marathon, because the marathon start line is probably one of the most beautiful moments, because everyone's there, everyone is nervous, whether it's their first or their 20th. You're always going to be nervous because it means that you care and you want to do well. But this feeling of the unknown is such a beautiful one as well, and you have to enjoy your first marathon experience.
Thank you, Coach Tala, for today. We have learned so much valuable tips. We really appreciate you joining us today, and hopefully we will see each other in more webinars to come. Thank you, everyone, and have a nice day.
Thank you, everyone.